In the future, the world is divided into two parts: the offshore, where the rich and privileged live, and the inland, a wasteland for the poor. Every year, people from the inland get a chance to prove themselves to the offshore through a process called the selection. When someone from the inland turns 20, they have one chance to pass a series of tough tests. Only 3% of them are chosen to join the offshore community. However, the chosen ones never return. After preparing their whole lives, people from the inland head to the gates of the selection process. Today is the first day. Candidates say goodbye to their loved ones and climb a set of stairs to reach the door. Once inside the facility, they are disinfected and given new clothes. A man named Ezekiel, who is in charge of the selection, addresses the candidates. He tells them that if they are chosen to be part of the 3%, they will share the same privileges as everyone in the offshore. He praises the founding couples who created the offshore. Ezekiel also warns them about rebel groups in the inland who try to infiltrate the offshore, but he assures them these groups will never succeed. Later, Ezekiel meets Aline, who has been sent to evaluate the selection process. This makes Ezekiel angry, and he demands an explanation from his superior, Nair. She explains that someone from the offshore was murdered by rebels, and now some people want to replace him. Next, the candidates are interviewed with all kinds of questions, intellectual, personal, and general. Many are eliminated, and some even cry on the spot. A woman named Michele is asked if she wants to pass just to see her boyfriend, who passed last year. She proves she doesn't care about him by smashing a necklace he gave her. The interviewer approves of her decision, saying it was a smart move because her boyfriend is dead. The lucky candidates who pass the interview move on, but this is just the beginning of the selection process. Meanwhile, after torturing a captured rebel, Ezekiel learns there is a rebel among the candidates. The candidates then pass through a machine that scans a chip behind their ear to verify their identity. A woman named Joana notices that the man in front of her has a fake identity because of a stitch on his ear. However, he still passes through, and the machine identifies him as Raphael. Next, the candidates are divided into groups and tasked with assembling cubes. To pass, each person must assemble 9 small cubes before time runs out. Michele helps a guy named Fernando, who struggles to reach the pieces because he is in a wheelchair. Raphael steals a cube to ensure his own success. Fernando then helps Michele by giving her a 9th cube, allowing her to pass even though she only made 8 cubes. Later, the passed candidates gang up on Raphael and beat him for cheating. Joana then approaches Raphael, befriends him, and warns him that she will expose him if he betrays her. Next, Ezekiel learns from the captured rebel that either Michele or her friend Bruna is the mole. Both are blindfolded and taken to an abandoned part of the building. They are told that if neither reveals who the mole is, both will be eliminated. After their interrogator leaves, Michele convinces Bruna that they should attack the woman in charge to save themselves because none of them are the mole. However, when Bruna attacks the woman, Michele stays behind, and Bruna is shot. When Ezekiel arrives, he assumes Bruna was the mole. In reality, Michele is revealed to be the mole, working with the rebels to avenge her brother, who was killed by Ezekiel. In the next stage, the medical examination, Fernando struggles to pass because of his wheelchair. He is taken to a room where a doctor injects a fluid into his back, temporarily restoring his senses. The doctor tells Fernando that if he passes, he will receive full treatment and lets him pass the medical examination. Next, the candidates are grouped again and taken to a room filled with mannequins sitting at a dinner table. For this test, they must figure out what happened in the room within a few minutes. Fernando comes up with an elaborate theory, saying the woman mannequin was poisoned by her food. Raphael, however, suggests that the woman mannequin is allergic to silverware. He notices that all the other mannequins are wearing silver items like watches and necklaces, while the woman mannequin reacts to the silver knife. Raphael submits his answer, and it turns out he is correct, allowing them to pass. More than half of the candidates are eliminated in this test, and the group prepares for the next challenge. They are given 6 coins for 7 people and told to decide on one person to eliminate. If they don't, everyone will be eliminated. Raphael tries to take a coin by force, but is stopped by a strong man named Marco. The group decides to draw lots, and Joana ends up being the unlucky one. However, as everyone takes their coins and leaves, the last person finds the sack empty. It turns out Joana had secretly taken a coin earlier, and he is eliminated instead. Meanwhile, Aline notices Ezekiel leaving for the inland and tries to track him using security cameras. However, Ezekiel is disguised as a beggar, so she cannot find him. When Ezekiel returns, he uses the facial recognition system to ensure his disguise wasn't captured. Luckily for him, there is no match, and he deletes the footage. Aline later reports to her superior, Matthias, who wants Ezekiel removed, that Ezekiel goes to the inland once a week. For the next test, the remaining 6 candidates are told to walk through a tunnel and place their hand on the other side of the wall. The candidates are confused because the tunnel appears empty and the path looks clear. However, they notice the earlier eliminated group covered in sweat and urine. As soon as the door closes, fear gas is pumped into the chamber, forcing the candidates to face their worst fears. The 5-minute timer begins. Fernando imagines himself walking again, while Michele is haunted by the death of her friend Bruna and by Ezekiel, who killed her brother. Joana is confronted by a gang leader from the inland, threatening to kill her if she ever returns. Next, Joana conquers her fear and crosses the tunnel, but is told that this is a group test and everyone must pass. She goes back, pushing and encouraging everyone to finish the tunnel. They all manage to place their hands on the wall just before the timer ends. The group successfully passes the test and is taken to their dormitory to join the other candidates who have passed. Later, a woman named Agatha is still in shock and lies on her bed. Meanwhile, Michele and Fernando share a romantic moment after everything they have been through. The candidates discuss their thoughts on what the offshore might look like, each imagining it differently. Joana remembers a day from her past when she broke into the house of the gang leader and found a gun. Hearing a noise, she panicked and accidentally shot and killed the gang leader's child. With a bounty on her head, she changed her identity to Joana and entered the selection process. Next, Joana goes to the bathroom, where she is attacked by a panicked Agatha, who tries to strangle her. Raphael intervenes and stops Agatha, sending her away. Afterward, Raphael has a private conversation with Joana. He realizes she used a fake identity and warns her that if she exposes him, he will expose her. He proposes they work together instead. Next, an alarm goes off when a child named Augusto from the inland enters the facility. Ezekiel stops the alarm, claiming it is a false alert, and takes Augusto to his quarters to feed him. It turns out Augusto is the reason Ezekiel visits the inland so frequently. However, Ezekiel now tells Augusto that he can't visit him as often because he is being watched. While they are spending time together, Aline interrupts, forcing Augusto to hide. She notices 2 plates on Ezekiel's table and becomes suspicious, asking if someone else is there. Ezekiel dodges her questions and manages to make her leave. Afterward, Ezekiel quickly takes Augusto to the border and sends him back to the inland. After a long night, the candidates wonder if it is morning yet, only to realize they are trapped inside their dormitory. They search for exits but find none, and they all realize this is a test. Marco notices gears with 8 levers, but pulling them does nothing. He then examines a screen displaying a pattern of numbers, which triggers a memory of his past. In Marco's family, everyone has passed the process, and he is the last one to take the test. Marco gathers the candidates and explains that the numbers on the screen are codes for the levers in the 8 rooms. He tells them they must memorize the codes and pull the levers simultaneously before the numbers change on the screen. Marco's plan works, and they are rewarded with a small amount of food, but the doors remain locked. The group agrees to share the food alphabetically, and Agatha eats first. Meanwhile, Aline sneaks into Ezekiel's room and tries to access his computer using a thumbprint she picks up from a cube Augusto was playing with. She is confident it's Ezekiel's thumbprint, but it doesn't work, triggering an alert. Ezekiel sends his security team to his room, and Aline is caught. Back in the dorm, the candidates work together to ensure everyone gets to eat. Just as they are about to pass this test, Ezekiel changes the rules, and no food is delivered. Frustrated, everyone goes back to their rooms except for Fernando and Agatha. Then a large amount of food suddenly arrives, drawing everyone back. Michele suggests they count the food and split it equally. Each person ends up with 3 portions. Afterward, the strongest candidates use bed frames to slightly pry the door open. Raphael goes out but discovers there is a second door that cannot be opened. Exhausted and low on food, the group grows desperate. Marco, leading the strongest candidates, resorts to taking food from one of the dorms by force, Marco tells Raphael that this is exactly what the process wants, to push them until only the strongest survive. Meanwhile, Ezekiel warns the council not to invade his room or go through his belongings, reminding them that he is leading the process. He abruptly ends the meeting and leaves. Next, Fernando watches as the strongest candidates raid dorms for food. He returns to his dorm and tells everyone to build a barrier for protection. Meanwhile, Joana tries a different approach and climbs toward the food vent, attempting to crawl upwards. When she reaches the top, she is confronted by Ezekiel, who takes her to the control room. At the same time, Aline examines the fingerprints she found in Ezekiel's room and realizes it belongs to a boy from the inland. Chaos breaks out in the dorms as Marco becomes more violent and kills one of the candidates. Raphael confronts him but is chased by Marco's gang. Raphael escapes to Fernando's dorm, where the group has built a barrier. They refuse to let him in, but when Raphael whispers something to Michele, she allows him to enter. Next, Ezekiel offers Joana a choice: stop the chaos in the dorms and prove herself, or have a final meal and leave the process. Joana chooses to return and organizes the candidates who had their food stolen. Together, they fight back against the strongest. After defeating them, Fernando's group opens their barrier, and the dorm door finally unlocks. As the candidates rush out, Marco, injured, tries to crawl through the door but is caught and crushed as it closes. Next, a flashback reveals that the person whose identity Raphael stole was actually his own brother. Raphael's motive is tied to his involvement with the rebels. What he whispered to Michele was that he knows she is also a rebel, making them allies. This revelation is why she let him into the dorm. Later, Aline confronts Ezekiel, revealing that she knows his secret. Instead of reporting him to Matthias, she proposes that he finish this year's process and name her as his successor. Ezekiel goes to his room and reflects on his late wife, Julia, who used to be an examiner. One day, Julia discovered footage of a young boy, Augusto, after some rebels were caught. After seeing the footage, Julia became deeply affected, watching it repeatedly and crying. Concerned, Ezekiel warned her that this behavior was disrupting the process and threatened to send her back to the offshore if it continued. Julia then revealed that Augusto was her son, whom she left behind to join the process. She pleaded to see him, but Ezekiel told her it was impossible. Next, Julia investigates where Augusto lives and decides to visit him. However, Ezekiel catches her just before she goes too far. He reports her, and she is sent to the Recovery and Treatment Center. Not long after, Julia commits suicide by drowning herself. This tragedy is the reason Ezekiel regularly visits Augusto, disguised as a beggar. He wants to ensure he stays the leader of the process so that he can take Augusto in when he turns 20. The candidates are then welcomed to a garden, where they learn that only 9% of them have passed. Each candidate is given their own room, decorated with pictures from their past. To their surprise, a relative is waiting for them inside. For Fernando, it is his father, who is proud of him for making it this far because he always prepared Fernando for the process. However, this is part of a test where candidates must choose between money and life in the offshore within 30 minutes. Next, Fernando tells his father that the money is more important as it will help their family. Michele, having no close relatives, is approached by an examiner who asks her to make the choice. For Joana, a man enters her room claiming to be her father, intending to collect her bounty. He ties her to a chair and demands she choose. Either he kills her and takes the bounty, or she walks out with the money provided in the room, which is double the bounty, and gives it to him in exchange for her life. In Raphael's case, his mother urges him to take the money, saying it will greatly help their family. When the time is up, the candidates reveal their decisions. Some choose money over life in the offshore. However, Fernando, Raphael, and Michele decide to stay in the process. Joana also chooses to stay, even after the man tries to kill her. As soon as she makes her decision, the man reveals himself as an examiner. His role was to ensure Joana isn't using the process as an escape from her crimes. Meanwhile, Aline completes her evaluation and reports to the council, stating that she found nothing wrong with Ezekiel's process. She even praises him in her report. Ezekiel then visits Augusto in the inland one last time, telling him that he won't be able to visit anymore. A few days later, Ezekiel, now depressed, confides in his security team leader, Cassia, that Aline is blackmailing him. However, he doesn't disclose what she has on him. Next, the candidates face their final, individual test. Michele is tasked with convincing parents to send their child to the process. To her shock, the parents are Bruna's parents, and she must persuade them to send their second child after informing them that Bruna has died. The parents are devastated by the news and furious when Michele asks them to risk their second child's life in the process. Michele calms them by sharing her own experience, telling them that her younger brother also died in the process. But she believes the chance to reach the offshore, however small, is worth it. Meanwhile, Fernando is tasked with designing a new test for the process. Raphael's task is to switch a projection to the opposite side of the room, but he must do it simultaneously. Struggling, Raphael asks another candidate for help, only to realize it's someone he bullied while working with the strongest candidates. Next, Fernando designs his test by modifying a previous one, where candidates had to choose between money and the offshore. He proposes adding an emotional element by lying to candidates that their loved ones are gravely ill and only money can save them. This way, the test would identify those who are truly motivated to join the offshore. The examiners approve his idea, and Fernando passes his test. Later, Raphael finds Fernando and asks for his help, revealing that he and Michele are rebels. Raphael warns Fernando that if he doesn't assist, both he and Michele will be killed. Reluctantly, Fernando agrees and helps Raphael pass. Next, Michele eventually convinces Bruna's parents to send their second child, despite the dangers. That night before the celebration party, Michele sneaks poison out of her body and secretly slips it into Ezekiel's drink when she gets the chance. Anxiously, she watches as Ezekiel gives a speech to welcome the 3% who passed into the offshore community. However, another man drinking with Ezekiel accidentally takes the poisoned glass, has a seizure, and dies. A doctor runs tests on the man's blood and finds traces of poison. Cassia immediately identifies it as a poison commonly used by rebels. Ezekiel realizes there is a rebel among the 3% and rushes to uncover their identity. After interrogating all the candidates, Ezekiel concludes his investigation. To everyone's shock, he arrests Aline, accusing her of trying to kill him. He even shows video footage of her pouring a drink into his glass as evidence. Additionally, he produces testimony from the captured rebel, who claims Aline is one of them and infiltrated the offshore years ago. Unbeknownst to the council, Cassia had coerced the rebel into lying, promising to end his suffering if he complied. But Aline protests, explaining that the accusations are false. She accuses Ezekiel of secretly visiting a boy from the inland, but all her evidence has been mysteriously erased. With no proof to support her claims, the council finds her guilty. Afterward, the candidates return to their rooms, but Ezekiel is waiting inside Michele's room with the poison bottle she used to try to kill him. In the morning, the remaining candidates are officially welcomed as members of the offshore, except for Michele. Ezekiel informs Fernando that Michele has been eliminated due to misinformation in her registry. In response, Fernando declares that he wants to quit and join Michele. As a result, he is eliminated and thrown out of the facility. Later, Ezekiel interrogates Michele, who is being tortured. He demands to know why she tried to kill him. Michele reveals that it's because he killed her brother, who was also part of the rebels. However, Ezekiel shocks her by showing pictures of her brother, alive and well. He tells her that her brother was never a rebel, and that the rebels manipulated her for their own purposes. Ezekiel admits that he himself was once a rebel, and that he knows their leader. He insists that the rebels' cause is based on lies. He urges Michele to tell him where the leader is, so they can end the rebellion once and for all. Michele refuses, so Ezekiel leaves her with footage of her brother to make her reconsider. Meanwhile, Nair confronts Ezekiel, questioning his judgment. It is revealed that Nair was the one who deleted Aline's information to protect Ezekiel. However, she tells him she no longer wants to help him. At the same time, Joana is summoned by Cassia and waits for Ezekiel in his office. While waiting, Cassia tells her that she was once called to the same place when she was chosen to become head of security. She explains that only those with true potential are summoned here. Next, Ezekiel speaks to the candidates who passed and informs them of the final step to join the offshore, taking a vaccine that will sterilize them permanently. Shocked by this revelation, the candidates question the necessity of such a measure. Ezekiel explains that the offshore is built on fairness, and heredity is the greatest injustice. He argues that children often inherit advantages or disadvantages based solely on their family, which contradicts the principles of equality in the offshore. While some candidates immediately agree, Raphael struggles to accept the idea, as he dreams of having children someday. However, after much deliberation, all members of the 3%, including Raphael, eventually agree and take the vaccine. Later, Michele reveals the location of the rebel leader to Ezekiel in exchange for the chance to meet her brother. After she provides the information, Ezekiel administers the vaccine to her and officially welcomes her to the offshore. He tells her that she will be placed in the recovery and treatment center, where her transition will be monitored, and she will be allowed to see her brother occasionally. Next, Ezekiel takes Joana to a room and gives her a final test. He presents her with a button and tells her that pressing it will kill a man who harmed her while she was in the inland. He claims that doing this will prove her loyalty and grant her a privileged status above ordinary offshore citizens. Joana refuses, arguing that this act would betray her principles. After a heated argument with Ezekiel, she decides to leave the facility voluntarily and return to the inland. Outside, Joana reunites with Fernando, who was also eliminated earlier. Together, they vow to bring change to the inland and fight for a better future. Meanwhile, Michele joins the rest of the new recruits, and they are transported to the offshore to begin their new lives. As they head to the offshore, they think about everything they went through to get here, the sacrifices, tests, and hard choices. They wonder if the offshore will really be the paradise they were promised, or if it's just another place with hidden problems. Doubts linger as they question if the fairness they were told about is real or just another illusion. The end. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like our channel and subscribe if you enjoy content like this. Also, let us know what movie you would love us to recap for you.